Hello, everyone. Julian from Busihub. Today, we cover the interesting topic, workplace well-being with Sha-En and Shaida. I hand over to Shaida now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Hi, everybody. My name is Shaida, and I'm actually tuning in from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I'm located in Southeast Asia, and I am an EQ coach, a corporate trainer, and I run programs on emotional intelligence, predominantly around companies in Malaysia. And I've been doing this for the past 15 years. And today with me, I have our good friend from Singapore. Her name is Sha-En, TEDx speaker. And what I like the most about her is her brand, Happiness Scientist. And today we're going to have a chat about workplace well-being. And it's the best person to talk to is definitely the happiness scientist itself. So welcome, Sha-En.
Thank you, Shaida. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing? How are you doing how are things in Singapore?
I'm great. Things in Singapore are very good. We are still going through the school holidays for the children. So I have two daughters.
Nice.
And so, yeah, school holidays time. So they are at home with me, and I'm trying to juggle my work and the kids.
Nice.
Familiar story.
Nice. Yeah, nice. Sometimes our participants, the learners ask us, you know, and think that we have everything things in place and perfect, but we also have our own challenges and all that. And as a speaker, I because I'm a speaker, I've always been very conscious on I make sure that I apply this. Otherwise, how do I teach others? Yeah, okay, so let's go
True.
back to how you got started. I'm so intrigued, and I'm so excited when I saw your profile and the brand of happiness scientist. So maybe you can start by sharing with us, how did you get this idea of happiness scientist? Because usually when we talk about emotions, happy, sad, it's very mushy feely, nothing to do with science. But here you are, the happiness scientist. Maybe you can share with us how this idea came about. And I know you're a graduate of psychology and you've done your master's in applied positive psychology. That's really, really amazing. But tell us how this happiness scientist come about.
Yeah, so as you have noted already, Shaida, I've done my master's in positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania more than 10 or 12 years ago. The memory is still very fresh in my mind. And I guess the one thing that I left UPenn with was this amazement that something like happiness, like you mentioned, is that it's fluffy, it feels intangible, can actually be learned and therefore can actually be taught. Because there was so much scientific research and evidence base that was supporting the research that then informed our ability to be happy or have high well-being. And so as I started doing my work, coming back to Singapore in 2011, I realized that actually, in a nutshell, what I'm doing is teaching people the science of happiness. And typically when I tell people I do happiness, I always get very confused looks. They'll be like, happiness? So what exactly do you do? And then I say, oh, I use the science of positive psychology to inform my practices. And I guess it was people who reflected to me and say, oh, so therefore you're doing happiness science? And I guess it became something that caught on with them and with me at the same time. So when thinking of my branding, I thought, hey, a happiness scientist would provoke quite interesting conversation. And I guess it has lived up to that name as well.
Nice. So I was going through your background, and I understand that you did some work with teachers and school kids before doing some work with corporate. You know, um, just assessing to your experience in working with teachers and school kids. I know that there are many of us, yes, we have our career, but many of us are also out there, are parents to young kids. So how important do you think kids' well-being today will affect their future? How important it is that parents today really take note about their children's well-being, apart from their academic performance. And you know how it is in Asia, right? Asian parents are all about academic. And then we're known for having tiger moms and tiger parents who are really pushing us for academic excellence. Yeah. Now, if parents were to ignore the need of well-being and just focus on academia, what could be possibly the long-term impact to the kids?
I think my journey into positive psychology was very inspired by my time as a teacher. I had a student who was very, how do you say, he was very strong academically. He would get 99 upon 100, 95 upon 100, but he was not happy. Or maybe it was his dad was not happy. And on many occasions, he would come to school feeling very teary, even after getting 95 upon 100 for a subject. And as a teacher, I asked myself, it's like, wow, we are here to teach them all these subjects, but are we actually teaching them about life? How do they deal with disappointment? How do they move away from all these perfectionistic tendencies or being so zeroed in on just one aspect of their life? And I guess that question brought me into the field of positive psychology as I started to look for answers. How do I help this child be happy? How do I help this child bounce back from challenges like these? To me, it wasn't even a challenge, right? 95 upon 100, it's anything that any parent would want, right here in Asia, as you have mentioned. And so I guess as I started reading, that's when I came across the first book by Dr. Martin Seligman called Learned Optimism, and that opened my eyes. I said, wow, we can teach something like optimism? Really? I thought that you're born with it, I'm either pessimistic or optimistic. And so as I applied what I had learned with my students at the time, I started to see them shift. And because I was the person applying it, I started to shift. I started to feel more positive about them, about myself, and about the education system in general, right? And so I told myself that when I have kids, I'm going to apply everything that I've learned with my children because it is an
Nice.
opportunity. It's an opportunity for them to be raised, not just to be validated on academic results, but to be appreciated as their whole selves, right?
That's amazing. I think you're
Yeah.
you're very lucky. My children are 23 and 27 as we speak today. And I missed the boat actually. And after they became an adult, some of the things that sometimes over dinner they will speak about, Mom, remember when we were young? You're so stressed
Mm,
out. Oh my God. I took them for holiday and do other things. All they could remember how I was stressed out. Oh my God. So it's true. People say people don't remember what you do or what you say, but they remember how I made them feel. And that was like, oh my
mm,
God, I get to learn all this way much later once they have become an adult. But I'm also seeing with my corporate participants who are adults, as they started
yeah.
sharing, and some of them started sharing about their childhood experience that has really shaped them to go into helplessness and all the other unpleasant emotions. Okay,
Yeah.
I love that you started. I mean, when you share, I could I could feel it's coming from love, and as a teacher to the kids. I mean, you could have just leave it as that's not my problem. That's a parent's problem, but that's really a teacher's love, and I really salute you for that.
Thank
I
you.
really, really
Yeah, I
salute you for
mean,
that.
I know I grew up in a family where my parents were fighting all the time. And I guess having that kind of experience, the question that was seeded very early in my mind is how can I have a happy family? Yeah, how can I create the environment when I have the chance to? And to be very honest, when I first found out I was going to be a parent, I was terrified because, like, oh my gosh, am I going to be that person who is going to have control, or so to speak, influence over a human being? Gosh, that's really
Yeah,
terrifying. Yeah, but then
yeah.
having learned and studied what I studied, I realized that in my hands was uh, I wouldn't call it magic, but so far as to say, like, I have tools that can help me to journey as a parent, as a working adult, as a human being. I have these tools
And
in my hands, if only I apply them, right?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
love that when I saw all your other talks, you spoke about how the tools are actually evidence-based. That's where the science is, right?
Yes.
It's all tried and
Yes.
tested. And, I really salute the work of psychologists in the world. I mean, I wish this is syllabus for year one when I was 7, but it's never too late
Yeah.
now. It's never too late, never too late. So just quick question about, since tapping into your experience with kids, what would you advise uh, parents of young kids today with regards to kids' well-being? What would be your one piece of advice if you meet a first-time parent or parent with young kids, and what would be the main gist of your advice?
Yeah, I would say, go back to think about why you have this child. What is the purpose and what's your goal for raising them? I think many of us forget about what that goal is and we listen to other people. There's so much advice coming to you once you turn a parent. And you have got to know in your heart what is your role for them. And I sincerely believe that as a parent, my role is really just to guide, to nurture. We're not here to control and force them to be the person that we want them to be. We are here to be there in their lives for them to be the person they want to be and they are meant to be. And sometimes because we have unfulfilled desires in our own lives, we project that onto our children. I've seen so many instances of kids going all the way to university, became a lawyer, and then just promptly quit once they fulfilled everything their parents asked them to do. And I think that's
I
doing our
know.
children a disservice, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I've come across my students at the bank, I just run through and ask them, what did you study? I even have students from medical school. I said, what are you doing here in a bank? I fulfilled what my parents, I did my medical degree, so done. Then I told my parents, let me do what I want to do. I mean,
yeah.
but he found joy. At least I see
Yeah.
the participant. He found joy that I get to make my choice now. I think that's really.
Yeah.
I mean, as a mother myself, I as I learned to be more matured about parenting, I learned that their happiness is number one for me. No parents wants to see their child to be unhappy. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
on parenting and young kids. So let's talk about working adults. Okay, so we are at this era, we've passed through the pandemic, and then we've gone through from the hybrid working, and then there's great resignation in US, quiet quitting, all those
Mm.
showing signs of, does that mean that working adults are showing unhappiness at workplace? So, for adults, okay, let's go back to, how would you, as a happiness scientist, how would you define happiness for adults, for working adults? How would you define that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to define happiness, right? But I think I will go back to a very simple definition by Brené Brown, who herself is a TED speaker, one of the best in the world. And she defines happiness as pleasure related to your surroundings or your current circumstances. So when someone says, I'm happy, they're saying that I'm happy at this point in time. But they could also, if we ask them, how happy are you about your life? Most of the time, they'll look back and see the big picture pieces of their life, right? Oh, I've got friends, I've got a good job, I've got this. And most of them would say, I'm quite happy. But then what does that actually mean? Right. So for me, I like to go beyond just that temporary state of happiness to think of it more as a more holistic sense of well-being. How do we assess the current state of our life, how we are feeling, but also how connected are we with the people in our lives? How meaningful do we find the work that we are doing? And also, when stress comes, when change comes, as we've experienced in the past 2.5, 3 years, how do we cope with stress? Do we crumble? Do we say, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to check in with my emotions and I'm going to respond in a way that's supportive to me? Or do we go into rage and blame everyone around us because the world is just making me feel like my life is unfair? So I think if we think of a broader definition, then we'll see that for us as human beings, when we're happy, generally we feel contented, we feel appreciative. In other words, we have more than what we need in life, right?
Right, right. So, in your experience meeting people, Yeah, just this one, just you know, out of 10 people you meet, probably over business network or casual or people around
Mm.
you, out of 10, how many would you say they're really happy, or they admitted they're happy, or you can see that they're happy? Out of 10, do you see that grow over the years, or you're seeing less and less people are happy?
I would say it really depends on what context they are thinking about, but let's talk about some of the clients and groups that I've worked with across APAC, right? And I would say that, of course, during the pandemic, I would say out of 10, maybe 5 were quite moderately happy, right? And of course, we understand that was a difficult time. Coming out of pandemic, I would say maybe that has become about 7 out of 10. Are they like jump on the world mountaintop and say, I'm the happiest person in the world? No. But I would say that they are moderately happy, meaning say 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 upon 10, actually feel quite okay with their lives. Of course, it's very subjective. It really depends on what they're comparing to and the context that they're in. But one thing I've noticed that makes a great difference, number one, is when there's a supportive workplace culture. And number two, they have great relationships in their life.
Nice. I think workplace culture really makes a difference, because we spend a lot of time engaged. Even if we're working from home, we're engaged with our work. So a lot of hours is spent there. So it's very crucial to have that good working relationship. Working in a company that has great value, companies that recognize you that you are human, not robot.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. And not just a task completer, right?
yes,
That you have
task
feelings,
completed. Yes,
that you have a
yes,
family, yeah.
yes. So I've come across, of course, leaders, managers say, hey, emotion, all this happy feeling, we all come here to work. What's this happy feeling? All this emotion,
Mm,
it doesn't have a place at workplace. Yeah. So I hope I'm seeing a pattern of more and more companies who are calling us to do work to to take care of their company, their people's well-being. So that's good news. Yeah. So these are for the bosses out there. Can you share, if you have some research that you know of, the outcome on or the relationship between happiness and work performance?
yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces of research, but I think one that I came across recently by Oxford University's business school have found that, happiness, if they feel happy about themselves, about where they are at work, they were more productive by 13%, right? And they
13.
surveyed like 1-3. Now you might think in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot. But if you think about it on a day-to-day basis in incremental value about productivity, then, and if you have 1,000 staff, then that is multifold,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the study covered 1,800 workers over a series of weeks to see that, if they tracked their happiness levels, how do they feel about the productivity, their engagement, and so on. So I thought that was quite interesting as well, that emotions actually do make a huge impact on how we approach the task that we're given, how we interact with our colleagues. If we are client facing, how do we show up in client meetings, right? All of this impacts. So to say that happiness or emotions don't play a role, then it's to say that humans' emotions don't mean anything, which we all know is untrue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good question here. How can you tell? I mean, this is for us, yeah, for those listening. How can we tell that we are truly happy? Can we? Is there any indicator that each one of us can look for to know that, oh yes, I'm genuinely happy, or is it I'm trying to? Oh, how do we identify? Am I being in denial here, or I'm trying hard to be happy, but the truth is I'm not happy? If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very challenging question, right? Because it depends on how self-aware, number one, a person is, how honest they are willing to be with themselves, right? Because, and also there are many levels of happiness. There's the pleasure part of happiness, which is like I eat something like a cream donut, and after that I'm like, woo, you get the high, the pleasure high. And then there's like the second layer of happiness, which is more like contentment. I'm content with the circumstances and the situation that I have in my life. It may not be the best, but you are okay with it. You're content with it. You have accepted it. That's like the second level. And then the third part is more like meaning and purpose. I can understand the reason for my existence in my life. So, I mean, if you ask these questions, many people would say, yeah, I'm happy, but they might be referring to the pleasure happy. They may not be referring to the purpose kind of eudaimonia, as we call it, right? And of course, there are scales like subjective happiness scale where you can measure your happiness levels, but it again requires you to be self-aware and honest and not think about, oh, how are people going to look at my results, right? So
I know, right?
Yeah,
I think self-awareness, just like in EQ, the first thing first is really the step is self-awareness, and sometimes we have our cultural conditioning that can become the barrier of seeing things as how it is. So like for example,
true.
we have this culture programming that says boys don't cry, boys cannot be sad, boys yada yada, and that can be a barrier for people to be really aware and noticing all the emotions. Yeah. So my next question would be, today over the social media, because of the exposure in social media, I've seen a lot of people coming out and sharing their bad past experience. And the more I realize that, a lot of people are going through a lot of challenges. So when I read about them, I always feel like, wow, my life is pretty boring. Not that I ask for all those really challenging stuff, but I mean, coming from empathy and compassion, yeah. But the question is, if people who have gone through a series of, they might call it bad luck or bad things that happen to them, is it still possible for them to work on finding happiness or creating happiness for themselves? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess what you're referring to is maybe experiencing some kind of negative experience or traumatic experience even. And to move them from there to happiness immediately, of course, it's not what we would anticipate they could do, right? It's just like standing at step 1 and asking them to jump to step 200. It's going to be a very difficult bridge. But I think it's possible for them, if they're ready, to go through a process of healing, meaning that they can unpack some of these experiences in a safe way with a trained professional a little bit at a time, or it could be a coach, or they could go on a journey of exploration and unpack some of these things slowly over time. And I've done a lot of this work for myself too, inner work. And then that's when you start to learn more about yourself, make sense of what that experience was, learn to reframe it in a narrative that is more empowering. And then maybe then you can find some pathway towards, bringing in more joy, more meaning, and more love, right? But if you have trauma, for example, or you have a very negative or toxic workplace environment that you're just coming out of, and to tell that person, hey, don't worry, be happy, that actually isn't very helpful, because at that point there are a lot of barriers, right? So I think that's where the empathy and the compassion can come in and say like, wow, what you experience is so hard. I may not be able to help you, but maybe I can just listen to what you've experienced, and that goes a long way in someone's healing as well.
I think I personally, for me, I grew up in a school where performance is everything, and then even though it was all about academia, but then it suppresses that vulnerability of, or that feeling that I can't do this, it's hard, and I personally had to unpack that and learn to make peace with it, to be okay if things don't work out. And then I also see this in a lot of people who are very hard on themselves in terms of performance. You know, I learned the hard way. I was a very black and white person. If all or nothing, this or that, you know, if I can't, I'm a loser, you know. It's tough. It's tough. And I had to take a long while to heal and unpack. So yeah, I'm glad to hear from you as a happiness scientist, to know that it is possible for those who are listening out there. Whether you're a boss, you are a boss, and you see, oh my God, my staff has this trauma and whatever, in its therapy and all that. That means it's good news. We should support them, don't you think?
Yeah, I guess there's always a debate, you know, how much should a workplace do and how much is it up to the individual? I won't go so far as to give percentages, but I think it's a partnership, isn't it? Like a person spends so many hours at work, and if you're the boss and the leader and you recognize that there's some things that's being triggering, or you know, that could be dealt with, and you know, the company can support in terms of resources, or even just putting in place some structures that could alleviate and support their well-being, then I would say, why not? You know, because they are in your care, so to speak, and committed to doing the best that they can. But how do they do the best that they can if the barriers are so high? And at the same time, as an individual, I think it's also fair to say that you cannot expect the company to do 100% of the work for you. You have to be wanting to support and heal yourself, and be willing to do the work for yourself too. But if both can come together, then I would say that's wonderful, because then you can come to the workplace and feel safe and be supported while trying to work on the things in the background, knowing that your job is not in jeopardy.
Yes. I think when people are worried about their survival, then there's a tendency to take it away and hiding it, and then it gets even tougher to handle. And you know, as people spend so much of time at work, right? So the workplace become a big part of our life, right? So is there any techniques or that we can leverage to feel happy at work, and especially when it's like there's a lot of tasks and like you, the moment that you feel there's so much to do, is there a special technique that you teach your participants? And that is there any special, especially when work is overwhelming?
Yeah,
What
I
would
think
you
that
suggest?
there are three words that I've heard quite recently. It's overwhelming, overworked, overloaded. It's, you know, overwhelmed, overworked, overloaded. And I guess they're all related. When you're overworked, you're overwhelmed. When you're overloaded, you you know, and I think a lot of it has got to do with the changes, people downsizing the company. So it means that you now have more work on your plate, right? Overwhelmed because change is happening so quickly. So I think one of the short-term things, which I would say, is in the moment, we need to practice noticing and becoming aware of how we are feeling in that moment. Now we can be very tempted to push it away and distract ourselves. Let's go and buy bubble tea, happy, then come back. But then you haven't dealt with how you're feeling in the moment, how your body and your nervous system are responding to all these stresses. And then for many people, it's like this bottle, right? You distract and then it builds up, and then by the end of the day, that stopper blows, poof, and then that's when we feel an influx. So we need to also learn how to release our emotions in a safe and reasonable way with people whom we trust, right? Whether that means talking to someone, whether that means going for a walk so that you can take those deep breaths as you walk and regulate your nervous system, right? Whether it means, you know, even if you don't want to talk to anyone, at least allow a space for the emotions to be released. Whether it's writing, you know, you talk into your pillow at night, you know, things like that. We have to let the vent open gradually instead of allowing it to explode, so that those feelings of overwhelm don't build up. And of course, practically, I would say, you know, we tend to look at all these tasks and see it as a mountain, right? And if you're that that solitary person at the bottom looking at the mountain, it feels overwhelmed. But maybe what we can do is to say, hey, you know, what is that one thing or two things that I can focus on in this moment, right? So that we can just focus on that instead of the whole mountain that's brewing in the background. And that will help us to feel a bit more in control. And as we get through those one, two things, we'll also feel a sense of accomplishment that, hey, you know, we've done this. We are making progress. Yeah. So, I mean, little things like these are what I tell my clients, what I tell my participants as well. The more we focus on the overwhelm, the more it's going to overwhelm you.
I know.
So,
It's just
right?
like be in
Yeah.
your face. But that's my
Yeah.
favorite, chunking it. Sometimes I put my to-do list. If it's too overwhelming, I put it in 2 pages so that I only see the first page. So
Yeah.
it's
I
not
think sometimes
overwhelming.
we overestimate, we put 20 things
Yes.
there without
Yeah.
realizing that just the visual of that is, you know, yeah. And
That's
honestly,
me.
who can do 20 things in one day,
I
right? I mean, let's
know.
be very honest with ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
chunking. And what about that's the task part of our work, right? How about a relationship? Yeah, so relationships at the office, you know, we're dealing with people who are different from us, and today
Mm,
it's even more diverse.
yeah.
People come from all different backgrounds, and now a lot of workplaces are very diverse: race,
Mm.
nationality, religion, beliefs, and whatever values even. Yeah. um ha- could that be, you know, can that be a barrier to happiness? So how do we create that in a very diverse uh, office and workplace?
I think DEI is a huge thing right now, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think one of the things is to shift the mindset from this is the way that we've always done things to having a more open and curious mindset. If people are different and you don't know about them, then instead of assuming that they should, number one, know how to do things your way, number two, that they're going to think like you do and act like you do, which is not possible if they are different. Instead of sticking so rigidly, you mentioned just now, Shaida, black and white. I think we've got to learn that the world now is no longer black and white. It is very gray. And if we are to be comfortable in the gray, then we need to be open to people who are different from us. And that starts with us being curious. We can't know everything in this world.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what
Yeah.
a person from Turkey has grown up like until I
Yeah.
talk to the person and ask them questions in a way that is out of genuine curiosity and say, hey, you know, I don't know what it's like growing up there. Would you like to
Yeah.
share? Would you be able to share a couple of experiences? Or, you know, notice when you're getting triggered by somebody's difference in opinion or action. Instead of blaming them straight away, you could say, hey, that's interesting. Now, where did that come from? You know,
And
and
get
be a
into the
little bit more
curious
curious.
mode, yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of blaming or shouting or,
Yeah.
reactive, because by being reactive, we actually don't get an opportunity to learn what that person is or who we are as well.
Just out of curiosity, when you work with your clients at corporate, do you get a lot of them reporting to you as they're experiencing burnout, and do you
Mm.
get that a lot these days, post pandemic especially?
Well, I would say that in psychological terms, we call it the long tail of the pandemic, right? When the pandemic was front and center, there's a lot of reports of overworking, fatigue. And just now you mentioned the word fatigue, right? It doesn't mean that burnout no longer exists. It's still there. It's still there because if you look at the three characteristics of burnout, you have fatigue, which is the most obvious, not just physical, but emotional, psychological. There's also a sense of cynicism, like why bother? Don't do also don't do also doesn't matter, right?
That's the
And then
quiet quitting, isn't it? That's the quiet quitting, isn't it?
cynicism.
Yeah.
And then the
Okay.
third one is a feeling of inefficacy. They don't feel like they can do things the way they used to, or they're not as productive, they're not as efficient, they can't seem to tick the boxes the way they used to. So if you put all three together, then that's how they classify workplace burnout, right? So is it still there? It's definitely there, but is the spotlight still on it? Not as much as during pandemic. Because people assume that, oh, now you can meet people, now you can travel, why you still burn out? You know, that's an assumption, but it's not true.
It's not true. It's still I still get requests for combating burnout. How do I combating burnout? Burnout, it can be one source of main source of unhappiness at work, wouldn't it? I think nobody
I mean,
would want to
definitely, right?
experience burnout. So what would you suggest to the management of companies if they run a survey and then people are reporting burnout? What would be your suggestion to the management or managers?
I mean, I would, number one, I would look very practically. Is it really there's just too much work to do? Because sometimes managers may not be aware. Why? Because in cross-functional departments, they may report to one person, but they're involved in projects across different departments, in which case the main supervisor may not be able to see what they're doing and continue to assign work. So I think the first thing we can do very practically is to check, is this person really doing maybe the work of 4 people or 3 people, you know? And that can be easily tracked to see how much work is on their plate. So if that's the case, then I would say, as an employee, I would go to my boss and say, boss, can you help me to prioritize which 2 to 3 projects I can work on? If I'm a leader, I need to be clear with my directives and say, hey, these are the 2 to 3 things that you need to focus on for this quarter, so that you can get the best out of the person. Because you also don't want an overworked, frenzied, anxious person working for you, right? Because that means that they are not going to be productive and they're not going to be able to do their best, which is what you want, whether you have clients or not. Right?
So you rather have quality work rather than, all packed, but you don't get the quality kind of work.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes. So I think practically that's what I would do. And then number 2, of course, we want to be able to understand what could be reasons for them feeling burnout. Is it also situational reasons? Is it cultural reasons? Is it individual factors? I think all of these can be done through several ways, whether it's surveys, talking to them, actually spending time with your people, I think goes a long way to just finding out what's going on. A lot of companies, they're like, okay, because the company is so big, so they run pulse surveys. I mean, I see the value of that, but I think people will feel so much valued if you as a leader just took time to say, hey, it's been 6 months since we caught up. Let's have a coffee. And even if it's virtual, hey, let's have a coffee. Let me just send you a Grab voucher for $5 or $10 to buy a Starbucks while we have this coffee. I mean, it's a small gesture, but I think it can go a long way to them feeling like you're genuine. Because if you're a leader, if you're a leader, you want the real reason or you want the fake reason that they just throw it at you. Right? So yeah.
Okay, I have one last question about happiness at work. So we spoke about post-pandemic burnout at work, being overwhelmed with tasks and all. There's one more factor. We all know that we are in a VUCA world. It's been talked about for many years. Uncertainty can be a trigger for a lot of people. When there's uncertainty, we know that business disruption can take place anytime. Things are moving very fast. Things can get disrupted overnight. And things are changing now with the introduction of AI. God knows what's going to take place, technologically, business-wise, economically. So what would you suggest to employers, management out there in taking care of the employees' well-being amidst the uncertainty as we navigate through the uncertainty? I mean, that I don't think any company can proudly say, hey, the next 20 years, we're going to have this kind of revenue. I don't think that can take
No,
place
it's like
anymore in
the
today's
business
world.
cycles have become so short.
I know, it's
Yeah.
scary, isn't it? So what would you suggest to the employers and management out there?
I think we need to look at change with a different mindset. You know, people tend to be averse to change because change means I got to move out of my comfort zone. Change means it feels unsafe. And of course, definitely, right? Some change can definitely be very triggering. But I think there's also the positive side to change, right? And I guess the mindset is, can we be ready for this change if we don't, even if we don't know what the change is going to be like? And what that means is, you know, we can go back to fundamentals. Fundamentals means, you know, checking in with our people. Fundamentals such as, what are we grounded in? What is our commitment to the company or to our customers or to our people? What are the values we hold dear? What truly matters? You know, sometimes as a company, it's so easy to get caught onto new trends and like AI, right? Of course, if you don't get on the boat, you get left behind. But what is fundamental? People are fundamental, right? If we jump on the boat at the expense of our people, then you're quite likely going to see those results in people leaving, people getting burnout, people writing horrible reviews on Glassdoor about your company. So I guess
Yeah,
we want to ask ourselves again the bigger picture question: what truly matters, even as we go
yes,
through this change? What can
yes.
ground us, right? And if we go back to those grounding pieces, then we can make a more informed decision about these new things that are coming our way, as opposed to reactionary measures. Like, oh, got this thing, okay, let's do it. Oh, got this thing, oh, let's do that. You know, and then by the time you do all this reaction, you don't know who you are anymore as a company or a leader or a team, right? And that
Yeah,
is very
yeah,
unsettling because people don't feel
yeah,
safe when you do that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Seeing change from a different lens, yeah, and getting excited about it rather than being driven by fear. I think knowledge will help a little. I don't know. For me, reading up and being in the know, and then it doesn't sound that scary anymore.
Yeah,
Even just,
definitely. And
yeah,
that's part of being prepared, right? You
being
have the
prepared. Yeah,
skills, you have the mind, but you also have the heart. I think all three have to
yeah,
work together. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Now,
Mm.
there's. I'm also noticing there's a trend. I think this has been going on for a while. Yeah, that employees do work out every day, and some of them like to do their gym jogging, and all that before going to work. To evacuate stress, apart from taking care of their health. Of course, they want a healthy lifestyle. They want a healthy body so that they can perform at work. Um, the question is, does physical activities like that have produce happy hormone? Does that
Oh,
contribute
definitely.
to brain performance and happiness and things like that?
I mean, if you do it once, I think everything that contributes to something of your well-being must be done sustainably. So if you just do it once, like you climb a mountain today and expect the effects to last for 10 years, it probably isn't going to. But if you work out, say 15 minutes 3 times a week, or for some people they do it more regularly, then definitely physically, of course, the hormones like adrenaline and oxytocin, all these things are going to be produced when dopamine, right? When you exercise. But in order to have sustainability in your happiness, which I think most people want, rather than a stock market, then I would say find something that contributes to your well-being and do it consistently over time. And even if it's a
And
little
build
bit
build a
every
habit
day, yeah, if it's a little bit
and make
every
it a habit.
day,
Huh?
yeah. I mean, James Clear's book on atomic habits talks about exponential and compounding
Yeah,
effect of 1% a day,
yeah,
can
yeah,
make a
yeah.
huge difference over time. So it's the same for workplace. What is one thing you can do as a leader with your team every single day or 3 times a week, or something that's sustainable that over time would exponentially lead to greater well-being, as opposed to thinking, I need to have this huge workplace wellness festival for 3 days, bam, and then everyone's happy after that. Yeah, I
I
mean, I much prefer that hey, how about let's spend every meeting when we check in to find out what is something good that happened over the weekend with your family. And then the following week we ask, what is an achievement you have, no matter how small. And if you just have this practice every time you do a check-in, I think you'll go far better than a wham bam thank you ma'am festival for 3 days.
Or
Yeah.
convert the whole floor to a Google like space. That's very famous. It was very trendy, and I start seeing offices here in Kuala Lumpur. I say, wow, they're trying to create the Google workplace. I think it's great, but it has to be, that's the hard part of it. Easy, right?
Yeah.
Procurement say, oh, let's convert, let's do renovation. But the soft part of it, I think that's where the leaders can play a role. And if smaller companies, they don't have that big investment to make that kind of the Google type of workplace,
Yeah.
the software part is it's a great place to start. I totally love that. And this is on the leaders to take up and for them to see, we can't lead the team the same way like our mom and dad when they become managers way back 80s and 90s. I remember starting off in the 90s, our manager just say, do this work and done. Nobody asked me how are you and all that. And we did our work. But it was very different then. But today
I mean,
is something else.
generations, we have the millennials, we have the Gen Zs in the workforce now, and that's not what they need. So the question as an employer, as a leader is, do you want to continue your old ways and face a workforce that's not gonna respond to you, or do you want to shift and recognize the value in doing so?
Right. Okay, I think I had a good. I love listening to your input, and I have to say this. I just love that happiness scientist, like that's like right in your face. That's what it's all about, yeah. Happiness, and there's science behind it, and it's work performance related. It's just, to me, it's like, if anybody not looking into this, they're losing out big time. It's something that I feel every organization must look into, and to start realize the importance of creating this excellent and workplace, yeah, for the mental and emotional well-being for the employees. So with that,
Absolutely.
I would like to say thank you so much for your time. I know
You're
it's your time
welcome.
is
Thank
very
you for having me. I
precious.
enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. Once again, I just want to share to the audience out there, bosses, employers, uh, emotions matter, happiness matter. Treat your employees like human beings. They are there not just to earn a living and make profits for the company, but they are there as human. So if we treat them as human, keep them happy, uh, you know, uh, take care of their well-being, I think the company, the organization will definitely flourish. So, any last few words, and for especially for the bosses out there, from you, Sha-En?
You'll never know how much impact you can make with one small gesture. Yeah, I think sometimes as leaders, it's a tough role to play. I'll acknowledge that. There's a difference between being a boss that just gives directive and a leader who people look up to. But I think being in a leader's role means that it starts with you. So yeah.
Nice. So thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much, and see you again in this Hub podcast.
Yes. Thank you.